There is no way to avoid it. Sustainability. It's advocated in the clothes we wear, the events we go to, and the products we use. It can be overwhelming, but I wanted to make a difference. In the last 2 years, I changed most of my habits into ones that advocate for a fairer climate. This meant eating vegan, only buying secondhand clothes, and only sipping from metal straws. I felt good about myself. I was really trying. And I think that this is true for a lot of people. We all try to make more greener choices because we understand that something needs to change, even if it's just by eating meat only once a week. But then I got introduced to this book, A Better Environment Doesn't Start With Yourself, written by Jaap Tielbeke. In short, this book states that it's cute what I'm doing and choosing to live more sustainable, but it's not enough for me to only look at my consumer choices to have the actual radical change that is needed. We are caught up in a system that is focused on making personal eco-choices instead of looking where the problem truly comes from. There's this myth that green consumers can partly give the solution to tackling the climate crisis, and in a way this is logical. Because if you want to make a difference for all people, you need to include them into the solution. We all want to hear what we can do to make a difference, and if we cannot answer it, we tend to feel powerless. But attacking people who still drink milk every day does not keep the dairy industry from expanding. And never taking a flight again does not make a difference when politicians plan to open new airports. By having a focus on personal behavioral changes, we are not looking to the structural problems that are held in place, and we are not holding the ones accountable that do the most damage. We have to go past this hypocrisy that people are held accountable for as an individual consumer, and rather focus on their individual action. It is way more valuable if a citizen takes action on challenging the system and its structures than it is to blame them for taking a flight. So, where do we start? Let me first outline what our main structural problems are and why it is that we are not able to transition to a greener society as quickly as we would like to. The biggest obstacle that we are facing is overconsumption. There is simply so much production that we cannot produce it much longer within the boundaries of our planet. This is not a new message. We know that within more wealthier countries there is more demand, and because of it there is more supply from the countries where the materials are extracted. But the main reason for this overconsumption is not simply due to our demand, but because of the way our economic system is built. We live in a capitalistic system where the main value for a country development is based on growth. And in itself, there's nothing wrong with this. Growth can be a great tool to see development, and we need this visualization. However, within the system, there is only a focus on economic growth and not one based on value or with an eye on natural resources. This all stems from how our history has shaped the importance of profit. During the Industrial Revolution, there were great discoveries and there were many beneficial changes into people, their daily lives. Yet, this time is also the turning point for how we look at nature and production. It is based on the removal of natural resources that were produced by slaves on land stolen from colonized people. In this time, self-sufficient economies were destroyed, and for the first time in history, it meant that people, their lives, were focused on intensifying productivity and maximizing output. Production was no longer about satisfying the needs of people, but rather it was organized around profit. Now, to make myself clear on this, I'm not against profit. Profit is important in order to grow as a company and send out or act out what you want to do. However, the problem that I see with profit is how this has become the main focus in production, and because of it, it always turns into more production. In order to explain how strong this connection is between consumption and production to the climate crisis, I'll explain how it's portrayed in renewable energy. When we talk about the climate, we mostly talk about energy. The largest source of carbon dioxide emissions that is created by people is from the combustions of fossil fuels. Burning these fuels releases energy, which is most commonly turned into heat, electricity, or power for transportation. Because energy is the biggest source of CO2, it is fair to say that this is where we need to start for a solution. Inventions for renewable energy are on the market, and these too bring new hopeful prospects for the future. Yet there's this view that growth has no influence on it. There's only the idea to do more with less energy. This decoupling has not happened yet, and rather has shown to do the exact opposite. An example for this is how our televisions, their energy use has decreased with 25%. Great, right? But at the same time, our televisions have gotten 25% bigger, and more people have been buying televisions. So in the end, the situation remains the same. This means that bringing renewable energy into the market will make a difference in the way energy is used, but it will not make a difference if we keep on growing. It means that we need to find ways to degrow. It means that we need to find ways to put other values before profit. So this is an intense realization, and when I first heard about this, I was overwhelmed by the connection. Within all aspects of our lives, we have to reevaluate the importance that continuous growth has within our society, within our lives. But who should take responsibility for this? As I stated before, it's not about the individual choices we make as a consumer. I admire people that never take the plane, and the message it sends out is really important. Yet there needs to be a better strategy to truly change how we deal with the environment. I believe that there are two main aspects that are needed for this better strategy. Firstly, we should hold the ones accountable that damage the environment the most. It's not fair to say that everyone is equally responsible for the climate crisis. Although we are all in this problem together and have to find solutions together, we're not all equally responsible for the emitted CO2. In the past decade, there are countries that have grown and produced more than others, and there are certain companies that have polluted the air more than we could be responsible for as consumers. Companies such as Shell have known early on how their business was contributing to the climate crisis and decided to give it no attention. Now we have to pay for the price for these decisions that are made by people in privileged positions. This is like going back in time and still believing that tobacco is good for your health. These companies know that their products are harming people, yet they advocate differently. At first, I wasn't able to fully comprehend this. I had a lot of people around me who were saying how a company like Shell is evil and should be fought, but I wasn't really sure why. A company like Shell isn't it also just manufacturing towards the demands that we have as consumers? Oil is in so many products that we use in our daily lives, and just like we are stuck as consumers to change our choices to make more green ones, these companies are also stuck in having to transition to them. But this is no excuse to change. Their focus remains on how to make as much profit as possible, and this takes a toll on our environment, but also on us people. The oil companies extract all available natural resources, which simply cannot continue much longer, because there won't be any resources left. But more than that, the extraction from oil creates problems for the local communities that work for the company. Because the main goal remains on the maximization of profit, the communities are asked to do as much as possible for as little as possible. Their lands are destroyed, their water gets wasted, and they live in hunger because of the extra environmental challenges that are caused by these companies. So no, not everybody is equally responsible for the emitted CO2, and not everybody is responsible for the damage that is caused to the people and environment. The second step for a better strategy is to hold the ones accountable that have influence in effective decision making. We as consumers have been trying to make more green choices in the hope that then our politicians will follow with greener decision making. But this still hasn't happened. The structures that we have hold the rich people and companies in place and lets the rest of our society pay for this price. There remains a lax attitude towards big polluting companies, and the government has even supported them with direct and indirect subsidies. What we actually need are laws that simply refuse this extraction of oil or gas instead of giving subsidies. This kind of intervention is what we need to go towards a hopeful future, but it seems that the Netherlands is not yet able to make such drastic decisions. As Professor Yohita Gupta describes it, social consensus is the Dutch disease. The climate crisis is screaming for radical change and strong political leadership, but this is not what we can see within the Netherlands. Rather, the politicians are pondering the hard decisions and looking for compromises in every aspect, so we don't have to make drastic changes to our lives and our communities. But this is not a sustainable choice if we want to save ourselves and the planet in the upcoming 9 years. We need to be realistic about what we can and cannot be decided upon in politics. But one thing is sure, and that is that change needs to be radical. What I've been talking about is focused on the shift of who should take responsibility for the climate crisis. And there are already many initiatives and movements that are focused on this. Although our individual choices as a consumer do not make the true difference, there are many ways in which we can take individual action. So it is not about the choices as consumers, but the action we take as citizens. We have 9 more years to make a meaningful change and save ourselves from the climate crisis. It needs to happen quickly and it needs to happen now. So, what can you do? There are 3 ways I now believe are effective action and take power into the transition to a greener environment. It's about the personal actions that we take to create the space for change. First, you can create change with your community. You can do so by creating collective actions that approach a number of people to take the same action. Going vegan on your own does not make a difference, but what if your whole school cafeteria would go vegan? What if your whole neighborhood committed to the idea? This concept is called crowd acting. With crowd acting, one asks, would you act if 100, 1,000, or even 1,000,000 other people would do the same? Instead of making a fund, people are asked to take an action if the goal is reached. Other examples of change with your community is to sign up to new ones. There are organizations such as Follow This or Milieudefensie which take different forms of action with their community. It can be as simple as buying a stock from Shell or signing petitions on their campaign. Not that much effort, but with a big community it makes a difference. Secondly, you can create change with your voice. There are numerous ways to use your voice to advocate for the climate and make an actual difference. Marching on streets grabs the attention of politicians and media. It puts social pressure on the current ways of looking at climate policy, and it's important to give a voice to those that are not represented in it. You can also use your voice by talking to other people, creating talks like I'm now, and speaking up in your surroundings. Finally, you can create change with your right. Every 4 years, we have the opportunity to vote. And this is a prime example addressing how you can use your right, but there are also other ways. Milieudefensie decided to take Shell to court and address how their policy was not adapting enough to the arrangements that were made in the Paris Agreement. This lawsuit can now become an example for other countries and companies to fight such misjustice. And if, like me, you are not a lawyer, support the ones that are. Be the one that brings these people together. There are many ways to use our human right to create change. So there's no way to avoid it. Sustainability. It can be overwhelming and it can be confusing. But I have hope to create this better future, without losing my sense of realism or being too optimistic. For me, this means bringing together people through creativity. I am also just a student from Breda, but I want to share the messages about climate crisis in ways that everybody understands and is included. All I can hope from now is that you will find your way to help too.